Hello, we are live. I think, Chris. I think that's it.
We are live.
We are, yes. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the HSE Half Hour. My name is Lauren. I'm the Head of Networks and Communications here at E&G. So usually I join our live session saying I'm accompanied by Laura today. Of course, you can see Laura.
I am not Laura, no.
Not Laura. I'm joined by my director, Chris. So today, Laura is enjoying, well, not just today, but she's enjoying her sabbatical in Vietnam at present. So Chris has ably stepped in. So I'll hand you over to him to introduce himself.
I don't think it's for you to judge whether it's an able appointment or not. We'll let the commentary decide. But yeah, look, delighted to be here. I've worked with Lauren for 10 years and with Laura for 13 years. She'll correct me if I'm wrong. And I've been recruited in the health and safety space for 18 years, hence these lines here and here. So yeah, please make this interactive. Lauren is assured me she'll be keeping her eye on the chat, and I can see some stuff coming through already. So we'll keep it light and breezy, but this is a very serious topic at a really interesting time, isn't it? If you're based in the UK, as I'm sure some of you are, then we've just all been listening to Jeremy Hunt tell us how our lives are going to change over the coming 6 months and beyond. So it's interesting times to be a job seeker or to be a hirer. So I'm looking forward to the next 28 minutes or so and discussing that topic.
Fab. So as head of networks here at E&G, as Chris rightly said, we work closely together for many years now, along with the HSE team. So myself and the networks team, we create white papers on safety industry trends, run events, and we wanted to share some of this information with our wider LinkedIn network. So this, as Chris mentioned, is an interactive session. Please put your comments and questions in the comment box, all right? And I will do my very best to get to them. So for today's, I think it's the fourth instalment today, we are going to be discussing everything talent attraction and talent acquisition in safety. And we have got some statistics from our report, which we released earlier this year, which I will share shortly. So over to you, Chris, if we, I suppose, start with top factors that are most important to job seekers at present. And while I pass over to Chris, I will share our report, I hope.
Share the screen. Okay, look, when you think talent acquisition, half an hour is nowhere near enough. There we go. Nowhere near enough. So we've tried to break it down and hopefully give you some takeaways as well, because everyone, I'm sure, listening right now or listening to the recording will have been a job seeker, if not now, then at some point in their life, and in a leadership role, potentially as a hirer and particularly in the safety space. It's evolved a lot in those 18 years that I mentioned earlier in terms of the expectations of health and safety professionals. So we're going to talk first about the candidate side. So what is important to job seekers? Now, there are endless surveys. Obviously, E&G's is the most prolific and the one you should go to first. But there are lots of others, and it's something that's done regularly. So I've drawn upon three. Sorry, Lauren. That's 3 reports, ours included. But PwC do a huge report every single year. They changed the title though, which makes it a bit difficult to find. But this year it's the Global Workforce Survey, 52,000 workers, 44 countries. So there's a fair amount of data in that. And then LinkedIn, which we are on the platform right now. So it'd be remiss not to mention the good people at LinkedIn. They've just published, as in about an hour ago, a survey updated around what candidates' main considerations are when seeking a new role. So what I'm going to try and do is just group them, because there's a long list, right? And if you're an employee, why shouldn't you ask for everything? You know, you're a particularly health and safety professional. You've invested time, money, and your soul in becoming qualified and in that space. And it's absolutely, you know, you should be a valued asset to any employer. But we're going to try and group them. So if we go to the PwC, there's some commonalities there, as you'd imagine. So if we go to the PwC one first, they grouped it into four areas. No great surprise, compensation, and that's just not just money, but compensation is right there at the top. Purpose and meaning, which I'll come back to in a second, but you know, meaning and value of the role came out second. Competence and development came up as third. And autonomy. You know, there's so much talk about hybrid workplace, hybrid working, flexible working, and that is absolutely on the agenda for lots of people. LinkedIn, they've got a long list. They've got 15 on theirs. So I shall definitely group those. But if they have ranked them in order. So again, compensation is number one. And that's compensation and benefits. Balance is how they've described sort of work-life integration, which I think is a nice description, but that came out as number two. So the balance between work life and home life came out as number two. Flexibility, the two shouldn't be confused, because you can have a balance between work and life and actually then be required in the office to do your job. And let's not forget, not everyone works in an office. That's my slight gripe with everyone talking about hybrid working. There are plenty of people who are unable to do their job from home. So flexibility, or as much flexibility as is allowed, and upskilling came out as fourth. So that's the kind of context to it. The reality is that people are individuals, and different factors will matter more to some than others. Absolutely, forever and a day, the number one has been compensation. It's the first thing people look for. If you're going onto a job board and you start searching, the first thing you'll search is on a salary banding or a salary above a certain bracket. So that's no great surprise. The interesting thing, I think, and I will allude to the LinkedIn one now, because this came out as number 7, job security. I think if there's going to be one big change in the next 6 months or so, given cost of living crisis for those in the UK, you can't blink without seeing that on the news channel. Cost of living crisis, energy costs globally, stability. I don't think if you'd asked people working at Facebook or Beta or Twitter 6 months ago if their job was at threat, I don't think they would have. And tech businesses who've gone really heavy in talent acquisition have reversed that quite significantly, as you've all seen over the past month or so. So absolutely, job security, I think, is increasingly important. And I was interviewed recently for IIRSM, which some of you may know, the International Institute of Risk and Safety Management. Their Sentinel magazine, I was interviewed recently, and it was about that, the Great Resignation. What impact are you seeing? Is it the best market ever to be a job seeker? And it's hard to argue against it in the last 12 months, but the caveat that I put on that was, but the landscape has changed, and we've certainly seen that as a recruitment organisation in the last month or so, that candidates are nervous about moving, and it's completely understandable. So I'd be interested in those that are listening live and who would be willing to share what's most important to them. Lauren can pick those up if you put them in there. Compensation sort of goes without saying, and I think a lot of that is it's not greediness, is it? It's wanting a fair salary for a fair day's work, and I think that's that's what everyone should demand.
Totally agree.
Maybe part compensation from a monetary perspective, but I'd be interested if you could put into the comments or the chat there what you feel, if you are seeking, you may be looking right now, or you were to be looking for a new job, what will be the most important factors to you? They're the summaries from sort of LinkedIn. As I go over to our report, Laura, I've not forgotten ours.
Yes. Well, just before you do that, Chris, I'll jump in, because we have had a question just asking, have you found that organisations have had to significantly change their offerings other than salary to accommodate HSE candidate expectations in the last year or so? So have we seen much movement?
Well, I know you said not salary, but let's just talk salary for very briefly. We've got a salary survey coming out in January, haven't we, Lauren?
Yes.
That we've been surveying the health and safety world over the last month. So do keep your eyes peeled for that. Salaries absolutely have in the private sector and some public sector, and those who work in the UK will know about the struggles in the public sector in terms of salary rise at the moment. But in the private sector, generally increase in salaries has been around 6-7%, but we've seen a much higher rise. I won't steal the thunder of our report, but the rise is double digits in lots of areas, and I mean locational and sector for health and safety professionals. So we can't ignore salaries, because that's been a significant change. Outside of that, absolutely, it's the one thing which comes up and which is slightly conflicting in some of these reports. So a company's purpose and their vision and their values, I think through lockdown was getting a lot of noise. What do people care about? It's the purpose. What does this business stand for? Why do they exist? And can I attach my personal values to the values of an organisation? I'm not saying that's dipping down the list of priorities, but I think that it probably got a bit too much noise, because the reality is that people, and this is not me throwing accusations out there, but people will always put their own priorities and their own well-being first. So I think what it's probably moved from purpose is more towards things like, do I find my job fulfilling? Do I personally find my job fulfilling? Can I truly be myself at work, and do my values line up with the company? So, and do the company feel like they care about me as well as, their potentially external impact? Things like environmental impact, ESG, these things are important to individuals when they join businesses, and companies who have bad track records in those areas will struggle to hire. I think in particular in the health and safety space, it comes down individually to companies' track records in those areas as well. I certainly won't be naming names on this front, but if a company's had a poor safety record, whether that be fatalities, incidents, accidents, then when they go to hire, health and safety people aren't daft. They know the safety records of these organisations, and people like a challenge, but at the same time, the question to ask is culturally: is there an issue internally within that organisation? Reputationally, is it a fair reputation, or is there something inherently wrong in that business about the way they manage health and safety within their organisation? So there's different factors that affect HSE specifically. To come back to the question, have they had to change yet? So things like flexible working, things like remote working, where possible, every organisation's had to look at those types of questions. And then I think in a very competitive market, I don't think I've seen a market, certainly from 6 months or so ago, where health and safety professionals can get to the end of a recruitment process and potentially have 3 or 4 offers on the table. That wasn't the norm, certainly not in the 18 years that I've been recruiting the space. It became the norm probably six or so months ago, where we would get candidates down to the final hurdle, they'd be offered the role, and they've got 3 or 4 options on the table. So companies have had to think quite pragmatically about, we need to think, our first choice may not accept the role, but also we need to probably think a little wider in terms of the pool of people we can access from. And it's sectors and businesses in certain sectors are very guilty of assuming they can only take from a competitor or someone who understands the nuances of their industry sector. I'm sure there's some fantastic health and safety professionals on this who could move from one sector to another and apply the knowledge and the skills they've got and the competencies and learn a new sector or learn a new process or learn a new industry. So I think, I think companies have had to loosen that significantly if they want to get the best talent, and rightly so, I think.
Yeah, definitely rightly so. I mean, we've had a couple of comments come in, Chris, regarding what are the most important factors to individuals when, looking for a role. And reputation, as you mentioned earlier, is that going to culturally align? If you're a safety professional and you're potentially considering a brand that have had a lot of incidents and accidents over the last year, is that something that you want to have that challenge of? Job security has been mentioned, and I think with, the cost of living and the inflation, that's something that's going to increase, as you've said. And working environment, that's been mentioned as well as inclusivity and diversity.
Yeah, well, I lent on some of my network. So I don't know if Gareth has been able to join us, but I'd go so far as to call him a friend. I've known him for many years now. Gareth Evans is someone I've known for a while. So for those that don't know Gareth, he's the global HSEQ director for a business called Yonder, who build hyperscale data centers, big data centers, right? for some very big tech businesses. And I thought I'd lean on him. He's got a really interesting career path, and he won't mind me saying that, in that he's sort of topsy-turvy slightly, in that he started out and did a lot of contract work at the start, and I know that was for him to build a wider understanding of different sectors and different roles, whereas that tends to be something that can often come at the end of someone's sort of career, once they've kind of done their kind of stint of permanent roles, maybe going to contract basis. He did that the other way around. Secondly, he's somebody that's absolutely embraced technology from the start and built some really interesting models around predictive analytics. So you're probably wondering, why can't we get Gareth on here rather than me? Yeah. But sadly, it's stuck with me. But I said, what's the most important thing you look for in a new employee or in your last role? And he said it's all about people for him. Interestingly, company purpose and what the company does, he said, was less important, which does sort of resonate with some of the studies where it's starting to dip a little bit further down the list. I think, he has ended up at a company that builds hyperscale data centers, so it's a pretty cool company, to be fair. But he said, look, given how much time we spend in work, he used a different word. I will change it to idiots. I don't want to work with idiots. I want to enjoy my work and have fun, but equally be challenged. And the scope and the remit and the ability to influence an organization is absolutely key to whether he would accept a role or not. So all about people, which I think the next thing we're going to move on to is to what companies can do to sort of appeal to job seekers. And that's one of the things that I think gets missed with organizations. You know, I mean, oh my God, we've all seen those job adverts, which is just a list of duties, right?
Yeah.
How uninspiring do you want to be when you put a job
advert? You must have. This is required.
You will do. I mean, you know, it's an advert, right? It's not the job specification. It's an advert. And to go back to Gareth's point, which I'm very grateful for him. I think he was in Frankfurt at the time drinking a beer, so I got some honest answers out of it. But he's absolutely right. It's people. You know, companies don't talk enough about the people you'll directly be working for and what an inspiring team or organization or leadership team is in that organization. You stick a brand at the top and list a load of job titles. I mean, who's getting inspired by that?
Exactly that. I mean, that brings us really well onto this point here that Ian's put in the chat, which is, you know, I always look to the top for culture, you know, look top downward and ask where health and safety stands at board meetings. Again, Marissa's put in here, culture is so important. Finding an employer who can give you a sense of belonging is key. And again, I think that comes to Gareth's point quite well, Chris. So yeah, I think quite a few people are very keen to align with the culture of a business and the people.
But let's think about that. The reality of that's really difficult, isn't it? How do you assess a company culture from an advert, certainly, but from an interview process? So let's try and dig into that a little bit. So I guess it crosses over the two. So if you're looking for a new organization, we talked about the stuff that's important to job seekers, right? Let's use LinkedIn's list again. So compensation, the work-life balance, the flexibility that the role offers, the upskilling. I'm going to throw stability in there, and I'm going to take Gareth's one as well and put enjoyment. that is advice. You spend, I don't know, what's 40-ish hours a week at work, right, or doing work, depending on where that is. You've got to enjoy it. You've got to be some sense of achievement, but also enjoyment that goes with it. So they're the top factors that appeal to people. The obvious answer to what can businesses do to appeal to candidates is flip it around and go, well, just make sure that it's very clear that you meet the needs of candidates and that you offer them a good, fair, and hopefully even better salary. You can offer a good work-life balance or integration. Gareth's joined us. He's just joined, so yeah, he doesn't know what I've already said about him. And you know that sort of offer as much flexibility as you can, and think about upskilling and reskilling. We did a roundtable recently, didn't we, Laura, on reskilling within the financial services sector, which was really interesting. So that continuous improvement and continuous development for staff. So it goes without saying you can flip it that way, but I'm going to use some HR terminology here to try and build some kind of model around this. So what can businesses do, which is EVP, which I'm sure many of the people on here have heard before. So what does EVP mean? So it's employee value proposition. Again, that's a bit of a naff phrase, isn't it? Let's be honest. So basically about the total value to the employee of working for an organization. And again, you know, it's monetary, of course it is, but it's also non-monetary. So, and it can extend, yes, it's additional benefits. Yes, it's the flexibility that's offered. Yes, it's the culture of an organization. And often, and this is where probably purpose comes in a little bit, is like pride in the badge. Do you feel proud of the company you work for, about the work they do, about their achievements, and about the journey they're on? Do those things make you proud? So what can companies do? Well, they can articulate that better than they currently do. And it starts with, job adverts. It starts with talking about what is it actually like to work in this company. Use multimedia would be my suggestion. The impact of a video of just literally showing you around the working environment, integrated with some of the colleagues perhaps, or just individuals that work within that organization. I'm going to touch on diversity and inclusion because it's something that we've done a lot of work on. But if you take the diversity point, if you assume that people and companies are happy to take from a diverse talent pool, what actually people care about is when they're in there, that they feel included, that there's a sense of belonging to the company. So that's what you want to try and get across as a company. You want to talk about how you build this sense of belonging and inclusivity within a business. So I say those things. I always mention this because it's my recruitment bugbear, but I'm going to get it in there. I was going to get it in the heart. I just urge companies to think about their recruitment processes, because in the 18 years that I've been recruiting, so little has changed. You send a CV in, somebody assesses it, you get called to a first interview, you then have a second interview and they offer you the job. And the to use another HR term, predictability, but the value of that process in understanding whether someone is actually going to perform well in your company in that role is so low. You may as well just chuck the CVs up in the air and grab one and go, we'll go with that person. I am being trite. I appreciate that. But genuinely think about the processes, the recruitment processes that you put in place, and just make it fit for purpose and use the tools that are out there. You know, psychometrics, people get scared of using psychometrics, but they're not scary. They're just supposed to add an additional insight into the individual, but also the fit between the individual and the company. So that would be my two messages there. I think would be, you know, paint the picture, talk about the people, talk about the leadership, talk about the purpose, but also make it real. You know, what's it actually like to work in this company? Who are you going to be working with? Secondly, make the interview process engaging. If you have got a candidate who's got 3 or 4 offers on the table, what's going to differentiate you as an employee? It's how they felt going through that interview process. What was the candidate journey like, to use a recruitment phrase? How much did they enjoy that process? Because that will be the deciding factor. You know, the salary will be similar, you'd imagine, and you know, the benefits and the flexibility probably nowadays companies are having to offer that. It's that candidate experience they'll apply that and go, okay, well, if that's how they treat me as a candidate, that's a key indicator as to what it's going to be like to actually work there. So yeah, get that right, please.
Yes, the interview process especially, I think that was a real good shout there, Chris. And especially, you know, we have to accelerate processes at the moment, as you've said, and rightly so, in order to keep up with the demand for talent. If people have got 3, 4 offers on the table and they're having to take time out to attend 3, 4 stages, it just isn't going to work. You are going to miss out for a fact of ticking a box and having to meet different team members. So
and it's the same principle even in the market we're about to move into, isn't it? Because what you did have was potentially someone have 3 or 4 offers on the table. Now you've got somebody who could be tempted to move. They've got some push factors from their current company, but it's better to, you know, in markets such as this where we don't know what's coming, the dreaded R word's been mentioned, and, you know, recession several times, you know, the Bank of England's talking about it, you know, and times are going to get tougher. Let's not kid ourselves, right? So it's a lot, people tend to hunker down at that point. They go, right, I'm better to stick with what I know rather than take a risk. So you've got to draw them out. You've got to give them a reason and a compelling reason to put their notice in and join your business. So yeah, companies can do better. I think as HSE professionals or as a health and safety director, manager, leader, then you can play your part, but also just put pressure internally. Talk to your talent acquisition teams, talk to your HR teams, whoever's, you know, external comms team, and start talking about, you know, talking about your EVP in terms of the value of someone coming to work for your organisation that goes beyond the monetary.
Yeah, agreed. So that brings us to another point then, Chris. So we've talked about client EVP and what businesses can do, but what can job seekers do to really stand out if they do find a business that aligns well with them culturally and ticks all the boxes? What can they do to stand out in order to be, you know, selected within the talent acquisition process?
That is an excellent question, Laura, and it's one that I also asked Gareth. So I'm going to steal from Gareth again. So I'll put the question to him. I said, look, if you're hiring tomorrow for your team, which, you know, he has been hiring recently, what's the one thing? I tried to make it a bit more clear. What the one thing a candidate do could just to blow everyone else out the water? And it's a great answer, but it's one that isn't in complete control of the candidate, if you like. And he just said, look, I look for diversity in my team, and diversity, you know, not by protected characteristics necessarily, but he said, I genuinely just trying to figure out if candidates could bring something different. That could be a different skill set, could be a different view of the world, could be different life experience, but then how that complements the existing team. So a candidate can't affect what the existing team is, right? So that's the bit that's outside of your control. But the key message that came from Gareth is, I want to understand them. You know, everyone has their interview game face on, right? They present the best version of themselves. In their CV, they probably present a slightly exaggerated version of themselves. We all know just a smidge. But look, the reality is when you get in that interview, you are interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. And the reality is that, and I know people get nervous apparently people get nervous of doing these things, Lauren, but people get nervous of doing interviews, and suddenly they withdraw within themselves and they don't give an accurate picture. And the reality is then, again, to come back to my earlier point, it's not a process that's actually helping you understand, or the potential employer understand, whether you'd be a good fit for that organisation. So Gareth's point is a really good one. I just want people to give the true version themselves, warts and all. I think a good point, which is I don't like the term soft skills, but a non-technical skill for health and safety professionals, which Gareth raised, is that, look, he said at some level I want to see how they can negotiate and negotiate with stakeholders, goal conflicts and trade-offs, as he described, which is a good description, between departments, between internal stakeholders, external stakeholders. That's a huge part of improving work. And I'll again steal his phrase, which he said, look, safety is if you do good work, you tend to do it safely. If you do bad work, it tends to be intrinsically the unsafe practices. So if this is all about creating good work and delivering on good work and executing good work, then you have to be able to negotiate internally and externally with stakeholders in order to make improvements. And I think from Gareth's perspective, that it's hard to argue with that. And that's something that probably HSE professionals walk into an interview and don't necessarily think that it's important that they get across how they negotiate, how they integrate safety, how they articulate a safety vision internally, and how that fits operationally into an organisation or with external clients or stakeholders if you're in that sort of business. But it is key, and trust me that the hiring managers will be assessing that. He also, Gareth's a fellow Welshman, so he also said that if they're Welsh, that helps. But, which is, hard for me to disagree with. But no, that was a jokey comment. But to my point, I'm looking at the time. We've got a couple of minutes left. My point around job seekers, if you are trying to present the best version of yourself, is just to remember that, really. Look, the only unique thing about you is you. So if you don't allow your personality and what's important to you and your values and the person that you are to come across, then you're not going to give the best version of yourself. The other thing to sort of accept, which as much as it pains me, is that interview processes, even if you do a good job with them, they are riddled with biases. They are from start to finish. And I'm loath to say accept the biases, but at least acknowledge them if you're a job seeker and say, look, confirmation bias. If I put a good CV forward, I'm walking into that room, they're already expecting me to be a world beater. Now, so take time and make sure you articulate your skills and your abilities in your CV. Don't make them go digging through your CV to try and find the information. Make it really clear, make it compelling, almost the counter to the job advert. Make a job advert compelling, but also make your CV compelling, and make it a good read. And then, there's an element of confirmation bias which is playing in your favor. Then they love your CV, you walk in the door, they're expecting you to be good. You've got to do something pretty badly wrong to turn that view around. Accept the biases and think about the recruitment process. Get a picture from the start of what the interview process is. Hopefully there's some creative stuff in there, but if it's just a traditional interview, then have a think about how you can build a rapport and build a relationship with that individual. Most people are on social media, or certainly they're on LinkedIn, so do you dig and find out what makes that person tick, and see if there's some shared views there.
Yeah, to jump in there, Chris, I think when you spoke earlier about EVP from a business point of view, it's about personal branding from a job seeker as well. And, shameless plug here, but me and Laura did, the first episode of this was all around personal branding in safety. So, feel free to go and watch that episode. But again, putting yourself out there, not just on social media, but gaining a mentor. You've then got opportunities that might not be, widely advertised. It just gives you a bit of a step up because people are already aware of you as a personal brand without having that traditional CV, which, tells about 10% of the story. So I think that's a good route to go down. And someone's here said, it's about being your authentic self. Ian's mentioned he was doing a Teams interview, which is, of course, very commonplace now. And he was asking, what will make us remember you over the other applicants. And he gave a bit of a witty remark and mentioned, you know, I'm a multitasker, and he was ironing shirts and had a bit of a laugh during it, but he got the gig, so fair enough. So yeah, I think that's what it comes down to, being your authentic self. And you know, I think there's some real good points to take away. So thank you for joining today, Chris. It's been
it's been a whirlwind 30 minutes. I don't know what you were worried about.
We ended just in time, so
it's been really enjoyable. Look, no, I think the next one is just before Christmas, isn't it? 21st of December, which is a mop-up of the year, which will be interesting. So I'll be tuning in for that one, just as an observer that time. And a lot more to come. So, look, thanks everyone. Thanks for those that have I've seen lots and lots of comments. I've been trying not to get distracted by those and let Lauren handle those. But I will definitely review those sort of when this comes up. And if anyone's got any questions for me specifically, reach out on LinkedIn. I'll happily have a chat.
Lovely. Thank you ever so much. See you later, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.